And we are live. It's time for another episode of Midweek Motivation Live with your host, Patrick Lee. We're going to be talking about freedom today, a topic that you probably don't know much about. There may be a couple of you that do, but we're going to be talking about a specific right of freedom and how we as Americans have the right to move forward in freedom. And we're going to talk about all of that right after this. We'll see you in a minute. And we are back. It's great to see everyone today. I hope that you're doing right, doing well today. It is the day after the 4th of July. This is the 5th of July, and I am still on the topic of freedom. Wanted to talk to you about a topic today. I hope everyone had a good time. People already tuning in. I just got off the phone with my good friend Jason, previous guest on the show. I've had numerous people reach out to me. Very grateful for that show. Actually, need to share a testimonial I got from someone about 2 weeks ago that reached out to me after that show that we did with Jason McCutcheon down in Austin, and needed to let him know. And I'll send him the messages that I received about that. One lady in particular said that show actually changed a family member's life, and they are eternally grateful for the topic that we covered in that particular episode. Talking about mental issues, mental health, and how to move forward in victory in your mental health. And was very grateful. And I need to send that down to Jason. Thank you. Just got off the phone with Jason. Jason's watching today. Love you, my brother from another mother. What a great guy. Very worthy guest on the show whenever we have Jason McCutcheon on. And also a rock star real estate in the Austin and now Waco area, I might add as well. So had a great time. The shows that we have, whenever we have a guest, of course, we try to bring on someone that's going to add value. We do want to help you achieve success in many areas of your life. And that does include, we talk about spiritual matters, financial, mental health, relationships, a lot of the things that matter to you and I. And these are all areas where we struggle in things in our life. And one of the things that I want to talk to you about today is something that was introduced to me a few years ago, pre-COVID, probably in the beginning of the COVID era, shortly after the election of our current president and administration. And it's about the power that the individual and the clergy and people have, the rights that we have in America. So this is going to be a little bit of a different type of a show today, talking about freedom. But yesterday was Independence Day. It was the day that we won our independence from being under the reign of the king, the rule over in England, and what that means, and what some of the rights are that we have. Many people don't understand a lot of the rights that we have as Americans in this free country, and most of the rights that we feel like are being infringed upon, of course, now by our own political leaders, not necessarily England. It is wonderful, but is it really? I'm not jumping down a rabbit hole on this particular topic, but I was sitting around with family yesterday. I grilled out and smoked a bunch of meat, and we had a wonderful meal, and we were sitting around in the backyard just enjoying the wonderful afternoon. It was not too hot, and the comment was made that we're going to need to start looking for some new conspiracy theories because our existing ones have all come true. And it's a standing joke for a lot of people, but it really does seem to be true. So many of the things that we have thought in our lives were just conspiracies have ended up becoming true. And the more we dig into these things, the more we find out these things actually did happen or are happening. Hey, Pete, A lot of people tuning into the show already. I love that. Midweek Motivation, of course, is now live on all um, uh, major podcast platforms. So wherever you like to listen to Midweek Motivation Live and other podcasts, you can find Midweek Motivation Live on Apple, iTunes, Stitcher, um, Spotify, you name it, just about. Midweek Motivation Live is there. And I found myself actually pretty high on the list when you look up Midweek Motivation Live on many of these, pretty high on the list with the amount of downloads that we get of the show. And I'm pretty happy about that. But yeah, a lot of people watching already. But back to this topic of freedom. It feels like we don't have as much freedom as we used to. Do you remember when we were kids growing up and we could just run down to a creek and fish and run around and do all the things we wanted to? You could play outside, not come home until the street lights came on. And in today's day and age, everything that we used to consider a freedom is now being infringed upon. The freedoms that we share, the freedoms of where you can go fish. Do you have to have a license to fish? Do you need a separate kind of a tag to catch a different kind of a fish? If you want to go certain places, you need a permit for that. You need a license for that. You need an agreement with someone else for that, or you have to pay a tax for that and then a tax on top of that. And it seems like we do not have as many freedoms as we used to. And as this country continues to grow, we have a certain amount of freedoms that are supposedly not able to be taken away from us. And many of those come through the Bill of Rights. When our Constitution was written, I have shared on the show in the past and in previous episodes a little bit about this. A couple of years ago, I actually taught a class on the Constitution, and it was funny to know that all throughout history, I never knew and was never taught that when the Constitution was written, that there were many governors that refused to sign it. And it was held in limbo for quite some time until they came up with the amendments to the Constitution, first, second, third, fourth, fifth amendment. And those amendments were added to the Constitution. So you have to amend something or make a change to it in order for people to agree sometimes to sign it. And in the real estate world, that's what we do all day, every day, is write amendments to contracts to make certain changes. So once the amendments were written, then our founding fathers all came together in a sense of agreement and signed it. And then we came up with the Bill of Rights that comes along with all of that. And the Bill of Rights, written in September 25th of 1789, see, our Independence Day was 1776, right? Watched a video yesterday, and there is a chain of convenience stores on the East Coast called Sheetz, and Sheetz ran all of their gas for $1.77.6 a gallon, so it came up to 1776. Apparently, this chain of convenience stores has hundreds of stores up and down the East Coast. I'm not sure how far west they go. And I just thought that was a pretty amazing. They sold all of their gas for $1.776 to commemorate Independence Day. But the Bill of Rights was not written until September 25th, 1789, in Congress. And I'm going to read you a little bit about this and what it says. Congress of the United States begun and held at the city of New York on Wednesday, the 4th of March, 1789. Put together these Bill of Rights. The conventions of a number of the states having at the time of their adopting the Constitution expressed a desire in order to prevent misconstruction or abuse of its powers. And that's one of the things we hear about a lot now is abuse of power, right? The further declaratory and restrictive clauses should be added as an extending the ground of public confidence in the government will best ensure the beneficent ends of its institution. So the Senate and the House of Representatives of the United States came together in Congress. 2/3 of both houses concurred that the following articles be proposed to the legislature, and they were when ratified by 3/4 of that legislature. The articles are as states, and I'm only going to read two of them or three of them. After the first enumeration required by the first article of the Constitution, there shall be one representative for every 30,000 people until the number shall amount to 100. And then it goes on to say, if the population grows, then that number will change to one representative for every 40,000, and then every 50,000, and so on as the population grows. Then we get into the second article of the Bill of Rights. No law varying the compensation for the services of the senators and representatives shall take effect unless an election of representatives shall have intervened. That means they have to come together and vote on that. And it seems like they're voting themselves more compensation all the time, which is not equal to what our compensation for what we do rises. But then the third article, and this is the one that's the kicker here: Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the rights of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So people use this term all the time against conservatives, against Christians, and say, hey, there's a law against this. There's this law. It's called the separation of church and state. And there is not a law separating church and state. It is a law that separates the state from the regulation of the church. Many people don't understand that. They say you can't mix politics and faith. And I wholeheartedly disagree. That is one of the key fundamentals of freedoms that we exercise in America today, is the freedom to preach from the platform the things that we believe are our God-given rights. And in this Bill of Rights, we have the right to assemble peaceably, to talk to the people about the things that matter. Is the government infringing upon the right of the church? And it seems like, I'm not stirring up the masses here, but it seems like every time you turn around, you hear in the news someone trying to attack the rights of a church for exercising their right to peaceably gather and to speak freely the things they believe that God would have them to say. But that is part of the Bill of Rights, the third article. Congress shall make no law establishing a religion, which is fine. Many presidents throughout the annals of history have claimed to be a Christian, and they have stated that this is a Christian nation, and it was founded upon Christian principles. Over 90% of everyone that signed the Constitution was a professing Christian of some faith, multiple different churches and faiths, but all under Christian laws. And so many people now have come out trying to rewrite history and say, well, one of those people was a slave owner, and one of them was married 3 times, and one of them was this, and how can they claim to be a Christian? And they use those same accusations against people today to try to tear down someone in their faith. But our faith is not based upon our outwardly, our failures. Our faith is based upon our religion with the Lord. So a person can still be a man of faith and still have failures in their life, because we are human, right? We live in a fallen world, and we will suffer falls from greatness, falls from living our best life. And that's not an excuse for bad behavior, but it is certainly a defense against the person that would say you are not a Christian if you don't live a perfect life. The only man that lived a perfect life was Jesus, and they killed him for doing it, right? All of us that are conservative and faith-filled people know that. And my pastor is a prime example of some of these things. He has traveled. He's been on multiple news stations. His name is Brian Gibson, pastor of my church, his church here in Amarillo. And also we have campuses in Kentucky as well, multiple campuses, campus pastors. And he brought something to my attention a few years ago, and that is a group of ministers that was called the Black Robe Regiment. And I want to talk to you a little bit about the Black Robe Regiment. And many of you are saying, I've never heard of these guys. I have no idea what in the world you're talking about. But this was a group of preachers that helped form or shape the nation that you and I just celebrated yesterday, the Black Robe Regiment. It was introduced to me through church at a service, and our pastor started talking about the Black Robe Regiment. And I was raised in church. I'm raised originally. The Democratic Party used to be different 50 years ago. When I turned 18, I actually registered as a Democrat. My parents were faith-filled Pentecostal Christians and were Democrats, and I thought that's what I needed to do, and I registered as a Democrat and moved to Texas about 2 years after I um, registered to vote and was legal age. And it wasn't very long at all before I changed political parties, became a Republican, registered Republican, even though I don't believe that the Republicans have all the answers. There is not a party out there that is more politically aligned with my beliefs than the Republican Party that has a chance of having any influence in our government. So therefore, I became a Republican. And I'm not preaching Republicanism. And I do believe that the Republican Party has many failures as well. Um, and that's neither here nor there. Politics in general, I've heard it said that if you break down the word politics, poly meaning many and ticks meaning blood sucking insects, that's what a lot of politicians are, is blood sucking insects. And there are many of them, then they're all finding a way to get into your pocket and my pocket. So, wow, viewership just went up. I started talking politics and religion, and the views started going up. I love that. It's kind of funny how that happens. But the Black Robe Regiment is there's a question posed online about the Black Robe Regiment. And I actually went to a website to bring you the definition of that and the answer to this story. And religion and founding of the American Republic, you can all look this up online. Check out the Library of Congress. All of these things are in the Library of Congress. Religion and the founding of the American Republic. In the bibliography, Henry A. Muhlenberg, The Life of Major General Peter Muhlenberg of the Revolutionary Army, in Philadelphia, Carrion Hart, 1849. Thomas Paine's Common Sense, written in 1776, and The American Crisis, R. Carlyle. Fleet Street in London, published in 1819. Many of these articles can be found online, but the question was posed, what is the Black Robe Regiment, and did it really exist during the American Revolution, or was the Black Robe Regiment merely a myth? Raise your hand, throw me a comment up if you've ever heard of the Black Robe Regiment and you actually know who they are, before I get into this topic real fast as we describe them and how this perhaps relates to you and I's life today, our success in life, how we move forward, attacking life, and moving forward with victory and commitment to excellence in life and the freedoms that we share in America. The term Black Robe Regiment referred not to a literal regiment of soldiers. They were not a bunch of soldiers like the Buffalo Soldiers or another group of soldiers. They were not a regiment of commissioned soldiers that wore black robes into battle, but they were an influential group of clergymen who promoted American independence and supported the military struggle against Britain. By encouraging the patriotic cause, these ministers helped muster up critical support among members of the congregations. Support the British begrudgingly acknowledged as vital to maintaining the colonists' frustrating resistance to British attempts to restore parliamentary rule. In this comparison of symbolic support to a specific body of troops, the term Black Robe Regiment is somewhat similar to the fifth column identified by the Spanish general Emilio Mola. During that country's civil war in 1936, Mola boasted that he had 4 columns of soldiers marching upon Madrid and a 5th column of sympathizers already living in the city who would support the army when it arrived. The term 5th column has since come to refer generally to civilian supporters that live within the population of a particular city, town, or country, even though that group usually lacks formal organization like a military troop or a continental army, but rather the Black Robe Regiment was more an epithet for the influence preachers exerted in supporting the patriot cause. Advocates of the British Crown found preachers' support of that cause particularly detrimental to their efforts to maintain loyalty among the colonists here in America. So these clergymen provided sanction for the cause of independence as well as formal support for the military effort. So you have this group of preachers in their black robes, these clergymen that through their pulpits were encouraging the colonists here in America to band together to maintain the cause of separation from Britain. Not they exerted the crown exerted so much influence among the colonists, they would become uneasy and start to waver in their quest for independence and would start to fall back and move away from the cause of freedom. And it was actually the clergy, the pastors, the preachers in the pulpits that actually helped bring the people back in line with seeking for a better way, a better land, a new country, for freedom from the crown. And it was this group of preachers that were embedded in the neighborhoods and the churches and synagogues all around the colonies that helped maintain that feeling of patriotism, of freedom. The Black Robe Regiment. In the 1770s, most colonists still considered themselves aligned with England, and many parishioners questioned the legitimacy of the revolution and of separating from Britain, and consequently the Church of England. From their pulpits, these members of the Black Robe Regiment reassured their audiences that their revolution was justified in the eyes of God. Winning and maintaining the support of the population was critical in the American War for independence, which relied heavily on the support of volunteers and the general population under the urging, direction, and preaching of the preachers. My hat is off to you today, pastors and preachers. Many of you now who claim to be a part of that Black Robe Regiment. This is not a formal group of pastors that has banded together and taken up arms against the government, but they are a group of preachers and pastors who are unashamed to preach the gospel in the face of liberalism, in the face of agendas that come against our Christian beliefs, in the face of political forces that seek to overthrow the conservative way of life, to tell us that we're wrong, that conservatives are crazy, that we are the religious right, that we are Christian patriots, Christian nationalists, and they try to brand us as a bad guy for being a Christian nationalist. Our pastor said this Sunday, "Are you a Christian?" Yes. Do you support your nation? Yes. Does that make me a Christian nationalist? If it does, I will wear that badge proudly and with honor and stand up for my faith, for my rights. The Bill of Rights doesn't tell the government that the church doesn't have any rights. That separation of church and state says that the government has no rights at all when it comes to churches. It simply states that the government cannot adopt one church as the official church of the nation like Britain had done. They were all under the church there, right? But on the other side of that, it also tells the government, keep your hands off of the church. You have no rights to regulate the church. Good morning, Lisa. Good to see you watching also. The government doesn't have the right to regulate the church. The churches are registered as a 501c3, a not-for-profit business. But the monies that come in to run a church, when people come in and they give to the church to support the local place, your house of worship, that money goes to not only keep the lights on and pay the bills of that church, but also to do missions work, to help the needy. And some people might say on the other side of the aisle that, well, the church is just getting rich off of people. and my patriotic rights are being infringed upon because the church is just heaping the money upon themselves. While that may be true with some churches, overall, the church that the man in the pulpit is preaching freedom. They're preaching the Spirit of the Lord, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom, there is liberty, setting the captives free. And that church is the one centralized and much needed force that is helping keep the forces of evil at bay. If our churches fall, America falls with them. I believe that. And I believe that many of you watching the show believe that. And if you don't, I understand everyone has a right to their own opinions, right or wrong. They're your opinions. And you have a right to them. But I believe that as the church in America goes, the fight for freedom, the fight for liberty, the sharing of the gospel is vitally important. And I would encourage pastors in our pulpits to stand up. Stop sitting down. Stop allowing people to bully you and tell you you don't have the right to preach the gospel. You have every right given to you by the Bill of Rights established by our own government to not allow the government to make you be silent in your pulpit. Stand up. Teach freedom. Teach the precepts and principles this country was founded upon and how they relate to our faith. Don't be afraid to preach all of the Bible, all of the truth. Don't just preach a part of it that fits your agenda. Preach it all. Let the word of God go forth and set the captive free. I'm not a preacher. I'm online. I do a podcast. But in my mind, as much as I can be, I'm a part of the Black Robe Regiment, and I would like for you to count yourself as such today. Join the Black Robe Regiment. Become a preacher of freedom, a preacher of the gospel of the good news of Jesus Christ, our soon coming Messiah. And this country still has the freedom to worship, to practice our faith. They do not have the right to silence us or to shut us down. And this whole Independence Day, really, that's what it means more to me than anything. Freedom from the crown, yes, but also the liberty, the freedom in Christ to be a Christian in the land of the free and the home of the brave. I challenge you to act that way today. Speak out for freedom. Don't be silent whenever someone starts attacking faith or our country. Speak out. Speak out. Not to fight, but to speak up for freedom. Don't back down. Stand strong. And I'm standing with you. I hope you guys have enjoyed the show today. That's a little bit of the Midweek Motivation Live take on freedom, what Independence Day means to me, and I hope that it means to you too. Until next time, this has been Patrick Lee with Midweek Motivation Live saying courage begins at the end of your comfort zone. Let's get out there and get uncomfortable today. Bye-bye.